fill those out. Fill the shoot. That's gonna be part. That's part of it.
Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that too. All right.
My first step.
Hey folks, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let's get started. And what I'm going to do is first introduce the panel and our distinguished guests, and then ask everyone to follow our Rotary Club Vietnam veteran Harry in the Pledge of Allegiance, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sylvia Barry. First of all, I'm Gil Sanborn. I'm a civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army, lived up here in Novato for a period of years, moved a couple of years ago down to San Rafael, but I'm a diehard member of the Rotary Club of Novato Sunrise, and hey, and love the spirit of service that I find in that club and many other clubs. To my immediate left is Sean Stevens, who's the Marin County Veteran Service Officer. Susan Wernick is a longtime resident of Marin County in Novato, very active in civic affairs, most importantly right now as a member of the City Council and the Mayor Pro Tem. Her son, Dan, is a West Point grad. Barron is a West Point grad and has served in the Army for 10 years. To her left is Eric Lucan, Mayor of Novato, co-sponsor of our event today, and then Sylvia Barry, whose brainchild this was 5 years ago, former president of the club and co-sponsor here. To my right, Ernie Bergman, longtime resident of Marin, served in the Marines, Navy. Sorry, shame on me. And people, Marines and Navy joke about each other. Navy personnel remind Marines that they're a department of the Navy, and Marines in response will say, yes, the men's department. So Ernie grew up in Marin County. He's been a president of the local chapter of Vietnam Veterans of America, and he's a member of the Marin County United Veterans Council. And then to his right, Jim Stein, a longtime resident of Novato. He's a member of the Army Aviation Hall of Fame, a recipient of 2 Silver Stars, 4 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and countless other ribbons and awards. So this is a distinguished panel. It's been an incredible honor for me to do this for the last 5 years, and the joy I get is interviewing members of the military and their families and hearing their stories and allowing them to talk to civilians. Civilians ask questions. This is the highlight of my year as a civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army, and I appreciate you all joining us. So Harry, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you, Gil. We'll pledge allegiance to the flag of all Americans, symbol of our democracy, our freedom, and our sovereignty. Place your hand over your heart or salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Sylvia Barry.
Thank you, Gil, once again. Really appreciate it. First, I would like to welcome a couple of our distinguished guests. Lori Fugurui. She's the district attorney of county. And of course, we have our Novato Fire Chief here, Bill Tyler, and he's a Rotarian, Sunrise Rotarian. I want to thank Rotary Club of Novato Sunrise President Eric Brown, I almost call you Eric Lucan, for hosting the event. Eric is Deputy Chief Engineer for Novato Sanitary District. And I want to thank our fellow Rotarians, Sunrise Rotarian, if you can wave, for help us prepare this event. and especially Sunrise veterans. If you can all stand up, Novato Sunrise Sunriser who are veterans. We actually have 13 members in our club who are veterans, and they are the inspiration for us to start this program, so thank you very much. Personally, a little bit background, I grew up in Taiwan and I came to the United States for graduate school after college. I adopted United States as my country, and I'm a US citizen. Through the years, I have learned about the freedom people have and how precious it is to have the right to vote, to have your voice heard. Our privilege to vote is only possible because of the sacrifices our veterans, our soldiers, and their families made to protect our democracy. Due to the new California Voters Choice Act, City Hall is open to voting on Saturdays now. So we quickly decided to stay at City Hall because of the significance and the privilege to have our event with voting right next door over there. You see and I actually received an email from one of the veterans who used to come here. He apologized because he will be working a whole day as a voter, helping voting today. So he wanted to see the video. Speaking of which, I want to thank Novato Community TV, Pam Hesley, she's the executive director here, for videotaping the event. So it will be videotaped, it will put on YouTube, and also will be played on Community TV channel 26, correct? I'm sorry? Yeah, if you want to, not to be on camera, it will be on camera. Otherwise, you may want to sit on the side. So I just want to give you a notice for that. So anyway, so I will always remember veterans who spoke at previous conversation with veterans event. We was one saying at our first event, that was the very first time he was able to talk about his experience in Vietnam. And also, we have somebody who stood up and said that was the very first time she was able to understand how her Vietnam vet relative felt after they come home. So that was really touching for me. And that was when I knew this is an event worth holding every year for the veterans, for their families, and for us to feel, to learn, and to understand. So now I would like to turn it to our city mayor, Lucan. I know his daughter is here. Thank you for bringing your daughter here. That's one thing I really appreciate. He always brings his kids to all the events where he can, and that's why we do this for future generations.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. You say thank you for bringing her. It was actually a last-minute loss of childcare while she's here this morning, so thank you for your patience with us. I just want to say on behalf of the Novato City Council, our community, as mayor, and along with Mayor Pro Tem Warnick and our entire city council, to welcome you all to our historic City Hall. I want to thank Sylvia and Sunrise Rotary for continuing this event now in its 5th year. This has really become a staple around this time of year, around Veterans Day, to bring our community together, to bring our veterans together, to say thank you, to recognize their service, but also to hear and continue to educate our community. I am not a veteran myself, but my life was profoundly impacted by a veteran, and that was my grandfather. Oh, hold on. Oh, you want to see? There we go. My life was profoundly impacted by my grandfather, who was a veteran, and he served in World War II. And what was very interesting, when he would talk about his time, he never talked about his time in the war. He never talked about his time in the Navy, which he was obviously very proud of being in the Navy. He never talked about his time fighting in the Pacific or anything like that. He always referred to it as his time in the service. And that really impacted me as I grew up and started to learn about service and giving back to my community. That's just how he perceived it. And he profoundly impacted my life, and I know many of us have been impacted by veterans as well, both directly for your service, but indirectly through the lives that you continue to live and impact our community. I'll just say one more thing before I turn it back over to Sylvia. This is a very exciting week here in Novato because on Thursday, the day before Veterans Day, we're going to be joining with Homeward Bound of Marin for a very special groundbreaking for a project they have for 24 units for homeless veterans. And that's happening this Thursday. When that project is completely built, it's very possible that Marin County will be the first county in the state of California to effectively end homelessness for veterans within our county. It's been many years in the making. I can't thank Homeward Bound enough, the County of Marin, the City of Novato, folks like Sean and others, many here in this room. It's been a group effort to make this a reality. So this is an extra exciting week with that coming up. So thank you for being here. On behalf of the City of Novato, myself, Mayor Pro Tem Warnick, and our council, we're excited to be able to co-host this event and have you all here at our historic City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Thursday
at 1:30 at Homeward Bound.
Yeah. And I also want to mention this is probably, this will be the last time Mayor Lucan will be able to help us co-host this event because, as we all know, he just got elected as supervisor for District 5. So congratulations, Eric. So what an honor. So we're going to turn to Gil pretty soon. However, I do want to mention a little bit about Gil. He joined the Rotary Club Sunrise, bringing him with the mission to bridge the civilian and military divide, and became a clear choice to moderate the program. Gil worked in investment banking in Wall Street for 40 years. His passion to support those in uniform, which extends to first responders, didn't start until after he witnessed the attacks on the World Trade Center from the next building. He saw the sacrifice of those rescue workers who responded to the attacks and gave their lives on behalf of New Yorkers like himself. Gil said he was only able to have a sense of relief and safety after he saw the U.S. fighter jet flew overhead after the towers collapsed. When the country went to war, Gil adopted soldiers, then a platoon, then organized his neighbors in Connecticut to adopt a 4,300 U.S. Army brigade based in Europe, along with their families and wounded soldiers, through 3 combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was appointed the civilian aide for the Secretary of Army in Connecticut. After Gil moved to Marin, he quickly resumed his civilian aide role. He spoke to different groups, like he's doing now. He visited National Guards while they fought fires, other disasters, including COVID-19. And most recently, 3 years ago, he helped bring the Army to the San Francisco Fleet Week. And last year, he participated in an effort to withdraw from Afghanistan. Gil constantly amazes us. So we thank Gil once more for moderating conversations with veterans event. Here is Gil. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I just want to make the point here, based on my life as a civilian and seeing the sacrifices of members of the military and first responders and their families on our behalf. Each of them takes a pledge to uphold and protect the Constitution of the United States. And a couple of years ago, on our Zoom panel, my friend Steve Miska, who served in the military for 25 years, said to me, democracy's not a spectator sport. The elements of the Constitution that are bestowed upon us, the right to vote, the right to free expression, the right to free speech, are ones that were won on the field of battle through the loss of life and blood here, and we as civilians have an incredible responsibility to honor those who sacrificed and exercise those rights aggressively and as honorably as we can, starting with what goes on next door. So it's a responsibility that we as civilians owe to members of our military, because we wouldn't have those responsibilities and rights without their sacrifices. With that, let me turn it over to Susan, and I'm going to set the scene for her. Her son's just finished basic training at West Point. He calls her up and he makes a statement to her. Susan, what was that? And how did you get from your son being a student at Marin Catholic High to finishing basic training at one of the most prestigious military academies in the world? Take us through the evolution of that.
Okay, so, is this on? You're younger in better eyes. I'm on. Okay, so the first question was, what did Ben say to me when he called me about 6 months into the school year? I got a call on a Sunday afternoon, and a very depressed voice said, "Mom, I think I made a mistake." So to back this up a bit, the West Point experience, stepping into West Point, is very different than being an enlisted soldier. And it's a big evolution for a parent. When he was a junior, he came home, he said, "Mom, I want to apply for West Point." And I thought, oh, no, you don't. Called my mother, I said, "Oh my God, he wants to apply to West Point." She said, "Don't worry, it'll blow over." Well, it didn't. And it's a long process. It's a long process. The acceptance or the application process is very lengthy. It involves your parents. It involves, oh my God, going up to Santa Rosa to that particular doctor to get the eye exam, going up to Santa Rosa to that specific doctor for a physical, running down some of the teachers at Marin Catholic to get their recommendations in on time, driving in bitter rain after my husband had colon cancer surgery to the East Bay to a luncheon of the I guess it was the Northern California chapter of West Point Parents. Very much fish out of water. So there had been this very long process, and once they're accepted, it's also getting ready for something called Aide, registration day. Incredibly painful. Long process to get there. You fly out across the United States, you get to New York, you do your little family trip, and you drive up the Hudson River, you drop down into West Point. Just one of the most amazing places. If you've ever been there, just amazing. And if you haven't been there, put it on your bucket list. We all wait for God knows how long out in front of Eisenhower Hall. Our time was something like 9:15 to go into Eisenhower Hall. And we knew what was going to happen. There would be a little speech, and then you'd be told, "Parents, you have 90 seconds to say goodbye to your new cadet." You would give them a warm embrace and watch them walk down the theater and out. And you didn't see them again until 3 o'clock that afternoon, out on the plains of West Point, sitting by company with people you didn't know, clear across the country. And again, if you see the plains of West Point, it's just immense. Everything at West Point is immense. And as you sit in the stands, you look across the field, and finally the new cadets come out of the sally ports, and they march in formation. You think you're going to be able to see your child, but they all look the same now. They've all had their heads shaved. They're all wearing the same clothes. And quite frankly, unless you have like a 4'11" daughter, you're not going to find any of your kids. So it was a lot to get there. So when I got this phone call, I thought, God damn it, you put me through hell. At the same time, we'd been warned this might happen. And so I remember going into the dining room, sitting down on my little bench, and having the talk and saying, listening to him. He'd been through basic training. It was brutal. It's, quite frankly, one child died during basic training. He was in his company, and his parents were sitting in front of us on our day. So it had been very, very intense. So they get through basic training, they start the academic year. They're plebes. There is some hazing that goes on still, not a lot, not like probably back in the 50s and 60s. But I just thought of everything that he had done and how hard he had worked. And when he had told me in high school and why he explained to me why he wanted to go to West Point, he said, "I don't want to do what my friends are doing." And he didn't want to go to Annapolis because that was too easy. So I knew this kid had expectations for himself. So we sat there and I let him unload and I said, you've worked so hard to get here. Could you just stick it out until May? And come May, if you still feel the same, we'll come out, we'll pack you up, and we'll regroup and figure out what you're going to do. Lo and behold, come May, I don't think he remembered he'd ever had this conversation with me. He loved it. He had made friends. But it truly was, it's incredibly hard. And I imagine, it's the same if your kid is enlisted. It's not what you had planned for your child. I thought my kid would go to UC Santa Barbara, UC Davis, entirely different path. I'm so actually grateful today that he did. It was an amazing experience for our family. And I think I'm a different person because of it. He's a different person because of it. But having that talk was really, really one of the most difficult things I ever did, because you really do. You want to just pack your bag, get on the plane, and go out there and get him. But I knew that he would be so disappointed in himself if he gave up that quickly. So that's my story. Does that answer it well enough, Gil?
Yes, perfectly. Susan, could you show the piece of paper that came in the mail? And at the annual Army-Navy game, there are public service announcements, I guess you'd call them, about all of the parents of naval cadets and West Point cadets that hear from all corners of the country when their children are accepted. Can you just show the folks here today what you all received and what that meant when that came in the mail?
Well, we got a little thing from President Obama one day, and it was this, and this was, it says, now I got to put my glasses on, the United States Military Academy. On behalf of the President of the United States of America, the Admissions Committee of the United States Military Academy takes great pleasure in announcing an appointment to Benjamin Edward Warnick, class of 2015, signed by Deborah McDonald, Colonel, U.S. Army, Director of Admissions. So this was what came in the mail when I phoned my mother and I said, guess what, he's going. And then I'll show also, it was pretty remarkable. When my son Ben was a sophomore, which we don't call them sophomores, but in layman's term, you're a sophomore at West Point. Here's 5 graduates from Marin Catholic. So we've got 2 Army, 3 Navy. Some of you may know some of these kids, but 3 of them were out of Ben's class. So this was pretty extraordinary. They all met up at the Army-Navy game, had this picture taken, and there you go.
I'm on Congressman Huffman's Military Academy nominating committee, and every year we get a number of very, very strong applicants to the academies from Marin Catholic. We talked about that the other night in terms of what may be different about Marin Catholic that causes people to decide to follow a path of service. Could you talk about that, Susan?
It really is just service. At Marin Catholic, they do have theology classes, and they also have a service requirement at the school, which I think a lot of the high schools have. But really, it was this idea of service, to serve your country. They have a that when they have college day and the colleges all come and set up their tables, it's, the armed forces come, and I think he was inspired. He was actually also inspired by Tommy Busterud and Dylan Wheeler, who were a couple years ahead of him. And these kids are honored at their, what do they call it? When, with their, at the end of the year, the kids that have gotten some awards, an awards night. And it just obviously resonated with him. But that idea of service is really embedded in their curriculum. And I think that's in large part why these kids wanted to serve and have served.
On that point, a lot of the work I do is supporting recruiting, and the country is facing a national security crisis because we're not able to fill our needs, particularly in the Army. And it's causing a reconfiguration of how the Army is organized, but all of the other branches are affected by that. A few years ago, there was a commission legislated by Congress to investigate the issue of service. And one of the outcomes of a very long report was the deficiency in civics education and the element of service that's behind that. To me, that's something that all of us need to focus on in terms of the quality of education in our schools and the service element that comes with our civic responsibility. One more point with Susan. She's the third Blue Star parent we've had as a panelist. You mentioned to me one Sunday at service your priest thanking members of the military, and you responded to that. What was your response, Susan?
I grabbed our pastor when I walked out, and I said, Father, this was the Christmas that my son was in South Korea, so he wasn't with us. And I said, you got to remember the families too, because sometimes we're in a whole lot of hurt as well. And we have to support our soldiers. So he got it. Hopefully he's not made that mistake another time.
I spoke for the second year in a row up in Sacramento on 9/11 at their incredible 9/11 memorial up there. And this year I focused on family members of first responders and members of the military as the unheralded, quiet segment of our population that's so critical for support. And I discovered that when I got our community involved in supporting this large brigade over in Germany. So much of our effort turned out to be supporting those family members over there who were far from home, and I learned a tremendous amount of what they go through in support of their soldiers in combat, and I've learned the same thing on first responders. So thank you for pointing that out to your pastor. Sean, I'm going to set you in a scene that you told me about the other night. You're at San Quentin on death row. All of the guard towers have...
Visiting.
Right, yeah. Not a resident, but visiting death row, armed guards in the towers. Everybody has to take a knee, and a convict on death row is brought to you surrounded by 5 guards. That was not what you may have anticipated when you were working in your grandfather's restaurant in Arizona years before, but take us from your youth in Arizona to that scene where you're going in to help a convict who's a veteran.
So, I started working at my grandfather's restaurant when I was 8 years old, counting change for the waitresses to carry their own bank. And then fast forward 25 years, I then went into the state of Arizona doing welfare fraud investigations in-house, and then child support enforcement, doing that. And then at the deli counter at the grocery store one day, this gentleman goes, oh, you work for the state? He was on the other side of the deli counter. I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, it's 2006. There's a big push going into Iraq and Afghanistan that year. And he goes, did you ever think about joining the National Guard, the Arizona State National Guard? I was like, no, I'm too fat and too old. And he goes, well, how old are you? That was all he was worried about, because he wanted a slow person. All you need to be is just faster than the slowest person. And he goes, I said, I'm 38. And he goes, yeah, I can get you a waiver for that. And he goes, you'll double up on your retirement points. You'll double up on so many things, benefits. And I went home and talked to my wife at that time about it. And she goes, no. And I said, they're not going to send me anywhere. They might have me doing paperwork or something like that. So I talked her into it, get done with basic training in October of 2006, take my paperwork to this little 23-year-old butter bar who was just learning how to project his voice, hopefully much better than mine today. But he goes, this is excellent. He goes, let your work know that you're deploying to Afghanistan January 3rd, 2007. And I was like, wait a minute. I don't know that I can do that. I don't know if they have the backup for me. He goes, you work for the state, right? I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, if you don't go, you'll be fired from that job and from the National Guard, and that's not a good deal. So 15 months turned into 18 months in Afghanistan, and I did 4 tours in Afghanistan. Come to Marin County, because my wife today said the universe will provide, and to come here. And I did, and I started looking for a volunteer job, because in 2010, there was a hiring freeze among all the government employers. So I went to start volunteering. I talked to Joan Brown in the volunteer office. She says, yeah, I think I've got something for you. She goes, let me give you a call back, or let me give you a call later on. She calls me up and she goes, hey, would you like to work in our veterans office? She goes, we have this 93-year-old gentleman who wants to retire. I said, I'll be there Monday. And so I volunteered 8 hours a day for, I think it was about 5 months, and he finally decided to retire. And I was like, is this guy ever going to retire? I started looking at jobs at Social Security and stuff like that. And one day the phone rings, and it's an inmate from San Quentin. And the guy goes, we'd like you to come down and talk to us about benefits and help us do some of the paperwork and help us with benefits. So let me see what I can do. So I hang up the phone. I was still a volunteer at that time. And I asked Mort, what do you think, Mort? Can I do this? Should I do this? He goes, you know what? It takes a lot of time to get in there. It's not what it sounds like. And they tell you a lot of crap, not the truth. And he goes, it's just a waste of time sometimes. And I said, well, I'd like to go to San Quentin. That's the place Johnny Cash went. I want to check it out. So I get down there and I had a great time. Started going every month. Then next thing I know, this gentleman, or this guard, comes to me as I'm walking out, and it was the most amazing thing. Here, first of all, when I would go in there, I walked in by myself. I didn't have any escort or anything like that. I'm walking across the yard, and the veteran population there obviously is just like anywhere else. It's made up of every type of person you can imagine, and every gang has a veteran, basically. Every group or whatever. And so I'd kind of cross the basketball court. They'd all stop playing basketball, even though they weren't veterans, and they'd let me through and they'd say, hi, Sean. And I'm like, wow, if my friends could see me now. Look at my and but now so this guard, he's like, we have a gentleman on death row who would like to meet with you about his benefits. I said, well, okay. He goes, we're going to set it up for next week. It's a big deal because we have to lock down the prison when we bring him out to meet you. I was like, wow, this is going to be cool. And they bring him down to what's, if you've been into San Quentin, they have the castle. As you've gone in through one gate, then you get to the castle, and there's a door off to the entrance of the castle called the boardroom. I'd always seen it, and I was like, oh, that must be where the executives meet or something like that. No, the boardroom is where they bring the death row inmates out to. It's still inside, but they'll bring them there to meet you. And so they walked me in there. There's just a little card table. And they go, all right, you got to walk around there and let him see you to make sure he's going to meet with you. You're the one he wants to meet with. And this guy looked like, what's his name, from the Green Mile. He stands up. He was big, just big. He just kept standing up. The chains kept going up. I was like, wow, this is cool. And he goes, yep, that's him. And they bring him out, and then they have me come back, sit at the table. The guards all have their rifles, which is kind of unusual in the prison. They lock down the prison, not lock it down, but they stop everything. People have to take a knee, and the other inmates have to stop where they're at and take a knee when he comes out of the cell. And these guards all have rifles, and I was like, man, this is crazy. And the guy was the nicest guy at that time. I mean, I guess, after committing the crime he committed, you kind of figured out how to be a better person, maybe. But he had been in Vietnam. He had seen a lot of crazy stuff. He was in Cambodia, and he gave me a picture of himself when he was in Cambodia. And he was just really a lost soul after Vietnam, and you couldn't help but feel some kind of sadness for him. I mean, the guy got back from Vietnam. Shortly after that, he committed his crime, I guess, and that sent him into San Quentin on death row. And we ended up getting him 100% for PTSD. And even though he's 100%, normally that would be a lot bigger dollar, be a pretty decent sized dollar value. When you're in the prison, you only get $110 or $150, I think is what it is now. You don't get the full amount of your benefit, and that's just enough to buy him, I guess, some soap or soap on a rope, or I don't know what they need, shampoo stuff, and just some extra stuff. And he's still alive, still there, and I'll get a message from him every once in a while, a letter or whatever. And it was just, if you were to tell me that bagging change at the restaurant, that one day I'd be walking across San Quentin or going in to see this guy on death row, I would never have believed it. To be honest, I mean, if you were to tell me I would be working in Marin County as a veteran service officer when I was, even 20 years old, I would say, no way. How's that possible? I can barely write my own name. But the Army, they teach you how to do all that now. They start from the basics. No, but it was the most amazing experience, and I'm just so grateful. And I got to tell you, all of you, I know almost all of you in this room, and you've all been so gracious to me, and I'm so grateful.
Sean, you, like so many veterans, want to continue to serve. And you talked to me the other night about the fact that you learned service in that restaurant. You carried it on with your work in benefits in Arizona. And today you're an advocate for veterans here in Marin County. What does that do for the veterans that you encounter? How do you approach them, and what do you see in terms of the transition that they go through when they see that they're eligible? And oftentimes for Vietnam veterans, it may be the first experience they've had that really validates their service. Could you chat a little bit about that?
So, I think I'll attack this from the perspective of a Vietnam vet first. First of all, I'm an Afghan vet, not a Vietnam vet, and but I'm blessed in the sense that I went to Afghanistan later in life. So I'm old enough that a Vietnam vet will be willing to talk to me, and and the fact that I went to Afghanistan, the younger veterans will also talk to me, the ones who went to Iraq and Afghanistan as well. And thanks. I don't know if this is going to help. But so then to have these Vietnam veterans who were treated so horribly when they got home. And the really sad part was it wasn't just by civilians that they were treated so poorly by. It was by other veterans. A lot of the World War II veterans didn't acknowledge the Vietnam veterans. And I saw that in the office before Mort left. I saw that happen. And I was just so disappointed. I mean, I was so grateful to be a veteran. And I couldn't imagine why any veteran would kind of set aside another veteran. I just couldn't imagine it. And so advocating for him is so easy because it's what I'm supposed to do, is fight the fight, and find out where the door is that has got the magic key or whatever, and not take no for an answer when I know the answer should be yes. So
I've worked with a number of VSOs, both in Connecticut, where I was a CASA for a period of years, and out here. And Sean Stevens is in a class by himself in terms of his energy, enthusiasm, and advocacy. So Marin County is really lucky to have him. So I'm going to turn it over to Ernie. And Ernie, let's jump back a few decades to when a lot of decades to when you were a sailor in the Navy. And when somebody thinks about that in Vietnam, they think about being on a ship 10 or 15 miles offshore, clean sheets, warm food every meal. That was not your service, and I learned over the years a term called the Brown Water Navy. You were in the Mekong Delta. You were supporting the 9th Infantry Division, taking rounds. That was not the duty on a destroyer. How did you get from Marin to that position in the Mekong Delta?
Well, you know, the presentations that have happened so far were so interesting, I've totally forgotten what I was going to say today, but I'll try to work it out. I was born in San Francisco, moved to Marin County, moved to Mill Valley when I was 1 year old, so I've been here a long time. Went through the whole school system, Old Mill and McGuire Tamalpais High School, which I'm very proud of. And when I was 17 years old, you know, in 1965, we were all trying to figure out what we're going to do. Understand, I'm sure a lot of you people here in this room understand this. In 1965, going in the service for guys was part of the deal. It wasn't whether you would go, it was whether what, you know, it wasn't this or that, it was when you were going to go. And because my father was Merchant Marine for 52 years, and most of my uncles were all military from World War II, for me, the military was just part of the process. I had a couple football scholarships. I could have gone to college, but I was sick of school. My parents were driving me nuts. I couldn't wait to get the hell out of the house. And so me deciding to join the Navy was a very easy decision to make. And I actually enlisted in the Navy before I even graduated from high school. I went to boot camp in San Diego. I was able to qualify for an A school. I was sent overseas right away. Now, going from when I was in Mill Valley to the Mekong Delta was a process that is pretty standard for most military people. You know, it depends on the need for whatever your MOS needs to be, MOS, Military Occupational Specialty. I became a celestial navigator. I was a surface ship navigator and I absolutely loved it. For somebody who failed freshman algebra and got a D in geometry, me getting into celestial navigation blew me away. I couldn't figure out how the hell that happened. But anyway, let me relate one story about being here in Marin County. I've been involved with veteran stuff since the early 90s, probably for 20 years after I got out of the service and after I came back from Vietnam. I basically dropped out of sight because when I got home, I was spit on in San Diego. When I went to college in Marin, I had hot coffee thrown on me and I was called a baby killer and a bunch of other names. And actually, as Sean mentioned, other veterans would treat us bad. My very first meeting at a veteran organization, they looked at me, asked me where I served. I said Vietnam. And they threw me out and they said, don't ever come back. Plus a lot of other expletive deletives that I probably shouldn't, but my heart was broken. When I tried to go to my very first veteran organization meeting and participate and belong and feel like I was welcome, I got thrown out and told never to come back. So I basically dropped out for 20 years. I was also at a Veterans Memorial Day thing down at Marin County. And after the ceremony, I went to the back room and got some coffee and donuts. And I was looking for a place to sit. And I saw a table of civilians. And I said, do you mind if I join you? They says, no, go ahead and sit down. So I sat down, felt pretty comfortable. And one of the people at the table said, where'd you serve? And I said, well, I was in the Navy. He says, oh, you never saw Vietnam. That really pissed me off. Because the Navy, as all the other organizations, Army, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, even Coast Guard, and all that, we were all very involved in a certain mission to participate to make sure that the total mission was successful. I ended up in the Mekong Delta because I was on a type of ship. Most people, when they think about the Navy, they think of aircraft carriers, cruisers, or destroyers. And believe me, the Navy and all the other organizations are far beyond what is just obvious to the eye. We were direct support, as Gil said, to the 9th Infantry, Army, out of Dong Tam, and anything that was part of the 9th Infantry mission was our mission. We made sure we provided everything we possibly could. And actually, I just met a gentleman in the audience here that was also in the Mobile Riverine Force with me. And we were the same rate, and we were basically stationed in the same place. So thank you for your service. But, you know, we all played a role, and we're all equally important to make sure that the overall mission, the overall effort was successful. If any of us didn't do our job, there's a possibility we would have failed. By the way, I'd like to mention also, I know an awful lot of people in this audience, and there are tremendous stories and experiences and people in this audience that would be able to sit up here on this panel and tell amazing, amazing accomplishments and stories. I am very proud and very flattered that I was even picked to be on this panel, because there's so many opportunities with people here in the audience that are here too. So thank you all for showing up this morning and being able to participate.
Ernie, you got involved with Vietnam Veterans of America here in Marin. What's been the nature of that organization and what you've gotten out of it, and what do you see the members of that group getting out of it? There's a critical element that I've seen in terms of mutual support among veterans, and having attended several of your meetings, I see it there. I see the sharing of experiences and that camaraderie that only veterans really understand about each other. It's just been an honor to attend. But what was that experience? What caused you to get involved in that, and what do you see the benefits of?
Well, as I mentioned, when I got out, and maybe for the first 2 years, you know, I just went about my way, and I went to college, and I did grad school, and had a job and all that. And then you know, when I had my bad luck of seeing the wrong people at the wrong time and being spit on, I basically literally dropped out from 1972 to 1992. And in 1992, that's when the first Gulf War happened. And when that started up, I unknowingly fell off an emotional cliff. And if I had PTSD, which I still don't, of course, I've been in a counseling group for 3 years. But anyway, I went over the edge, and I didn't know what to do, and I was crying, and I was depressed, and I was glued to the TV, and, you know, wondering what's going on, and all the memories of my experience in Vietnam all came rushing back. And a couple of my friends who were also Vietnam vets, like I said, I grew up in Mill Valley, noticed that I wasn't showing up at the typical watering holes that we always showed up at. And one of the guys who I went to high school with, who was a 173rd Airborne, he came over to my house and noticed all the windows were locked, all the doors were locked, all the shutters were drawn, and I was bunkered in. And he dragged me to my very first Vietnam Vets of America meeting. And I felt very insecure, and I felt like I was just in the Navy. And people would say, well, what'd you do in Vietnam? And again, it was the same experience. Well, I didn't really do anything. I was just in the Navy. Didn't realize that my Mekong Delta experience and my I Corps experience and all my other time, I spent 22 months in Vietnam over a 3-year period of time. I finally started getting more and more involved. And I realized, as Gil asked, how important the whole idea and the whole memory and the whole experience of the camaraderie that veterans bring each other and make you feel more welcome and make you give your own self-worth such a boost that I got very, very involved in all that. One of the things that we started doing, and I think a lot of veterans did this, is we were requested to come speak at the schools to teach 16-year-olds, 17 years old, you know, what it's like to be at war. And none of us really knew what we were doing. We kind of waited to get questions asked, and of course, kids didn't really know what questions to ask. And so I started doing some of that. But I realized that there was a flaw in the process, because when I go into a classroom at all the high schools in Marin County, we pretty much have spoken to all of them. We'd go in the room, and I sometimes wore some of my, you know, my I call it parade shirt. and some of your ribbons and your patches and all that. And a kid would come up to me and go, "Are you a veteran?" I go, "Yeah." And the first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh, how many people did you kill and what kind of drugs did you do?" And that was what the response was. That was the image of the military from a lot of the high school kids. All they knew about the military and about war and all that was what they saw on TV, what they saw in movies, what the last computer game that they played was. So, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Now speaking in the high schools, and I've spoken at colleges too. But what we did is we kind of regrouped the whole thing. And what we do now, and we have again for almost 20 years, every year we go into the high schools and we lecture to the U.S. history classes for the juniors, and we discuss what the reality of the military is and what the reality of war is all about. I tell the kids, of the 15 million World War II vets that can legitimately call themselves World War II vets, probably less than 20% ever squeeze the trigger. Of the just slightly less than 3 million Vietnam veterans on the ground, boots on the ground, Vietnam veterans, probably less than 20% ever squeeze the trigger, because the military is a team and it's a group effort. And what we do is we all have different MOSs and we all have different jobs. And if the shit hits the fan, we're all weapons trained and we all shoot back. But under normal circumstances, if you can determine what normal circumstance is during war, fact is we're all working for the same goal. And we all have different jobs we need to do. And we all must do those to the best of the ability for the whole mission to succeed. So we really, really get involved with the high school kids. We talk to probably 300 16-year-olds every single year. And it's very therapeutic for me. And I think it's good for the kids. And the teachers love it because they get a little time off. But the fact is that part of our community project as a Vietnam vet group and as veterans in general is we try to educate. We don't sell the military. And we certainly don't sell enlisting or joining or anything. But we just want to make sure that the frame of reference and that the perspective of what the military service is all about is realistic. And that's been very valuable to us and hopefully valuable to the kids too.
We talked the other night, Ernie, among Susan, Sean, and myself and you, about the unique aspect of bonding within the military that perhaps students, when they're thinking about careers, may not have any understanding of, but that experience and that element of teamwork that I can see exists nowhere else across the civilian community is so strong and powerful and enduring. Could you touch a little bit on that in your closing comments?
Well, as I mentioned, when I was 17 years old, I didn't have a clue. And me going in the service, I did it because it was an alternative. I never enlisted in the service. I never looked forward to going to the service because I wanted to go to war. That was not my motivation. My motivation was for the big adventure. I wanted to get out of the house and I wanted to go overseas and grow up because I was very immature and I was very unsure of myself. And one thing the military did for me was gave me confidence to complete the rest of my life. And what was your question, Gil?
About the element of bonding, the unique nature of teams in the military that doesn't exist in civilian life.
It's kind of like, I really think the whole bonding and the camaraderie and all that starts with athletics. Because I was a jock when I was in high school. When you're on the same sports team, when you're in high school or anywhere else, Cub Scouts, whatever, you get that bond. And the military is that same bond that you get when you're growing up, but 10 times or 100 times stronger because you're all, like I said, working for the same goal and working to accomplish a certain mission. So, and the bond, as you all probably can say, it doesn't end when all of a sudden you're discharged and you're back in civilian life. It's been 55 years for me since I got released, separated from the military in 1970. And I still love all my vets, and I love all my shipmates, and I love all the military people that I have association with. And I love all you guys because we all are kind of coming from the same frame of reference as far as life goes. And, it's something that's extremely important to me. I have absolutely no regrets for going in the service. A lot of people do, a lot of people don't. I have absolutely no regrets for being, for serving my country. And I'm very proud of being able to say I'm a veteran.
Thank you, Ernie.
Ernie, do you love me? Thank you.
I spent maybe 2 hours with Jim Stein last week on the phone. I think I've got 6 or 7 pages of notes. Just an extraordinary period of service in Vietnam. Take us to that scene where you're in a helicopter flying low, you take rounds, you get hit in your leg, and you get shot down for the 10th time. How did you get from Lehi, Utah, to that incredible, high-pressured, dangerous environment in which you were rescuing down pilots, you were doing reconnaissance, low-level reconnaissance, the most dangerous kind of flying there was? How did you get from Lehi to that environment in Vietnam, Jim?
Well, we lived in Lehi after I was born for about 2 years. And then my father was a construction engineer, and we moved to 7 different states before I got to high school. And I wound up back in high school in Lehi, where I actually spent 4 years in one place. That was a first for us. My father was working at Mercury, Nevada, doing the nuclear testing, and we had to stay in Lehi. After Lehi, I went down to Southern Utah to play football. And in between my freshman and sophomore year, I received the draft notice, and I looked at it, then I looked at the envelope, and it wasn't from the NFL, it was from the government. They said, do not enter school next year, you're going to be drafted. Well, I didn't pay any attention to it, so I entered school, got back in the football program, playing football, and sure enough, they called me up, and I played a game in Boise, flew back down to Southern Utah, got in my car and drove to California, and got on a train and got in the Army. And I was kind of proud of going in the service because my father and his 6 brothers served in World War II. And on my mother's side, 4 of her brothers served in World War II and Korea. So we had kind of a military background. I went through basic training at Fort Lewis, Washington, then AIT, heavy equipment operation in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. They called it Little Korea because it was always cold. During that training, AIT training, they asked me if I wanted to become an officer. I said, sure. So they sent me to engineer school because my father was an engineer. Most of my uncles were engineers. And so I got in there, and while in training, they asked me if I want to go to helicopter school. I said, sure, I'll go to flight school. I passed the test, and after I became an officer, they shipped me off to Mineral Wells, Texas, where primary training was in the little TH-13 or TH-55, just a little 2-seater aircraft. Got trained. Then from there, we went to Fort Rucker, Alabama, where we started flying Hueys, combat training. And after that, they sent me to Vietnam, which I didn't care. I didn't know that much about Vietnam. I heard about it in school and stuff. And in the military, we heard about it. And when you went to flight school, they said, well, if you're going to go to flight school and you graduate, you're more than likely going to go to Vietnam. So they shipped me to Vietnam, and I was assigned to the 335th Assault Helicopter Company, known as the Cowboys. You can see the little cowboy up there. I flew 21 months for them in the Delta, from Bearcat, which is south of Saigon, all the way down to the tip called Sea Float. That was our AO. And we covered some of the Navy boats that Ernie was on in those rivers in the Mekong Delta. And I enjoyed flying. In fact, I love flying, and I love flying in combat. It was a challenge for you. Well, after 21 months, they shipped me back to the States and assigned me to Fort Carson, Colorado. And I got a desk job as Assistant G3 Operations for a support group ready to go to the Middle East. And I called my branch up and I said, you know, I don't like my assignment. They won't let me fly here because I got too much time, they're saying. So send me back to Vietnam. They said, no, we've got a waiting list. I said, you're kidding me. No, we got a waiting list. I said, okay. Send me to fixed wing school so I can get my airplane certificate. He said, no, we don't have any slots, but you can go privately. So I spent 4 months in Colorado Springs getting my fixed wing certificate instrument rating. I got that. And I went back to my unit, and they said, we don't need you because you're going back to Vietnam in 2 months, so go find a job. So I went and found a job inside the base. And I called my branch, and I said, send me to Chinook School, which is the big CH-47. It'll carry up to 35,000 pounds. They said, no, we have no slots. How about the Crane, which you guys see flying around here with telephone poles and everything? No, no slots. We do have a Loach, OH-50, OH-6. I said, okay, send me there. So they sent me. I graduated from the school, got back to Vietnam. They assigned me to a CAV unit in 2 Corps, Pleiku, Kontum. At the same time that the NVA did their 1972 spring attack, they brought 30,000 troops across the border with tanks. And the United States only had a few elements there. We had 3 aviation units, and we had the 22nd ARVN Division. And that's all we had. But we also had a secret weapon called the B-52 bomber. During that time, where am I at? Yeah, during that time, say again?
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. During that time, flying recon, when you went down, you didn't say down, when you went in to the jungle, flying on top of the trees, looking for the enemy all the time, you didn't know what you're going to expect. But in time, you kind of learned how to pick up the trail. You picked up bent grass. You picked up the different color of the path. It's red clay up there in 2 Corps. So you could tell. And as you got closer and closer, you could feel the enemies really close to you. And you'd fly in there. We'd probably average 2 or 3 times a day at least getting shot at. And we didn't find them. They found us by giving up their locations. And yes, getting shot at a lot. You do get shot down sometimes. But the 10th time getting shot down was the first time in all that time, and many times we got shot up pretty bad, but we didn't go down. But I was really surprised when I got shot down the 10th time. My observer got hit in the ankle first. I swung the aircraft around, and we were just right on top of the jungle. And then it hit me through the right side, and I felt my foot come off the pedal. And I looked down, and it's like turning on a faucet. The blood was pouring out of my leg, all over my instruments. And I couldn't really read the instruments that well, but I knew we were going down. And I just called my guns and said, I'm hit, I have no foot, find me a place to land. And they said, you got 2 clicks in front of you, that's 2,000 yards, 2 clicks in front of you. I said, tell me when, because I'm gonna pass out here in a second. And they said, you're over it. I cut the engine, did a hovering auto rotation, attempted one anyway. I was out before I hit the ground, I passed out. They carried me out, a chase ship up above landed about the same time I landed. So they got me out of the aircraft and got the observer out of the aircraft. And as we were flying home, I was flying back to base to the medical station. I kept biting my fingernails. I don't want to die. So in the aid station there, they attempted twice to save my leg and they couldn't do it. They sent me down south to the 43rd General Support, 43rd Hospital, I think in Saigon. And they just told me, we're gonna have to amputate your leg. I said, just save my life. So I woke up, my leg was gone. I had no really ill feelings about it. My life was saved. One of my uncles worked for RMK, which he was one of the project managers, and they did the construction in Vietnam as the war was going on. They'd build schoolhouses and little hospitals for them. And if the enemy got in those places, we could not shoot back, ever, because they just built that school or that hospital. Well, he was there. He came to see me a lot, which really helped. He brought the whole ward a bunch of food and stuff. And then he finally medevaced me home to Presidio, San Francisco. That's when I got to fall in love with Marin County. I stayed in the hospital for about a year and a half. They asked me to stay in. I said, I'll stay in if you let me try to fly. They said, well, we'll see about that. So I took a branch transfer from the Corps of Engineers to the Adjutant General Corps. And that's S1 for all the military guys in here that know that. That's a paper pushing job. And I went through, graduated from the career course, and then I decided to retire, take a medical retirement. The medical, well, after the medical, I got out of the service, and I stayed here, and I got into handicap skiing. We set up a program, it was a program up on Lake Tahoe. And I learned how to ski again. And then I started working with other kids to teach them how to ski. I moved to Park City, Utah, and worked with the US ski team. I worked with them and we put on a few celebrity races to help raise money for the US ski team. After that, I got into golf, playing golf again. I put on 2 national amputee golf tournaments, put on 3 regional ones. It was good therapy for me. I also go to quite a few reunions, and that's great therapy, to go back and talk to the guys that you actually flew with. And you know, the greatest bond you ask, and Tony will agree to this, you got 4 people in a Huey, 2 pilots, a crew chief, and a door gunner, and there's a bond there. And when you get shot down, you work as a team to get out of there. You help each other to get out. And that, to me, was the greatest team we had in the military, in my opinion. I guess it worked also if you were in a tank or something, you have a team that you fly with. I never really flew with the same people all the time. We were assigned an aircraft, but you never knew if that aircraft was going to be flying that day or not. They tried to keep them up and keep them running. But when I got home, I was never mistreated. I don't know why I missed that. Maybe because when I came back from my tours in Vietnam, I flew into Travis Air Force Base. And then my mother picked me up and took me up. They lived in Placerville. I never ran into a crowd. I was never in a civilian airport coming home to be spit on. And I was really shocked when I actually heard that. What else you want?
Jim, you told me about the 2 circumstances where you were awarded Silver Stars that came relatively close to each other. And you also talked, and mentioned it today, about the thrill of flying, that you love flying, you love combat flying, but in particular, the motivation that you had to go into firefights to pick up other pilots seemed to me, from what you said and what I've understood from other veterans with whom I've spoken, is perhaps the strongest motivation that anyone has, and that gets into that teamwork and support of each other. Could you talk briefly about those two incidents?
Well, the first one, we were flying missions that day, and after we got through with our missions, as we were headed home, I got a radio call if I'd go in and try to pick up 2 American advisors at Paul Klein. The NVA were overrunning it. They were throwing mortars in there. And I said, well, sure, I'll go pick them up. I'll try to go pick them up. And they set up 4 gunships in a daisy train, 4 Cobras. And I radioed the lead Cobra, which was a 361st Pink Panther. And as I flew in to that support base, I noticed someone was putting 40 mics right in front of me, clearing a path. I thought, wow, that's pretty good shooting. And I only have my light on top. All the other lights were out because this was at night. So I landed in the base on top of a bunker, and I told my observer, I said, if you see someone coming at us really small, you might want to be ready to shoot them. And these 2 figures came at us, and they were good size. I said, that's got to be them. So they jumped in the aircraft, and we could see the enemy. You could see the fires. It was just exploding all over us. They jumped in, and I told the guns, I got them, we're leaving the same path. And as I left, I noticed the same thing. The 40s were going right in front of me, clearing away, out of the way. So I got up, and we took these 2 advisors to headquarters. And about 5 days later, when we were doing our missions, and after my first mission, I was refueling, we were refueling, and I noticed a Cobra gunship coming in, and it was wiggling, it was landing, and I thought, well, he's either got the front seater flying it, or they're in trouble. And they were in trouble. They were the second ship of a 2-ship that got shot up and shot down. The lead ship got shot down, and it was still out there on the ground. And I was listening to them on the radio, and as I departed Khartoum on my second mission, I asked them if they needed help. I'll be happy to go in there to try to get them out. They said, no, we have it. So all day long, as we were flying our missions, I kind of listened to it, what was going on, and they still hadn't got them out. And so after our last mission, and we refueled, and I was started to head home, they called me and asked me if I would take a chance to go and get them, because they've been trying all day to get them. I said, sure. But I said, you put my guns, I just want my gunships flying lead. So they gave me a briefing of where it was and what was going on. And I told them the path I was going to take in. I turned all my lights off, I set my beacon. And I went in there, and the area was surrounded by NVA. Ben Het, which was a fire support base, real close to it, they tried to send out troops to go out there to rescue the pilots. They got fought back. So we knew it was going to be a tough one. And I really didn't think I'd come out of there myself. I got on the ground, hovering around looking for the pilots, looking for the aircraft, to tell you the truth, and it was so dark. And I told the guns, I said, listen, it's too dark. I'm going to turn my landing light on and try to find these guys. And no one, as soon as that light goes on, all hell is going to break loose. Turn the landing light on, and sure enough, the tracers started going by. They started hitting the aircraft. And we swung the aircraft around, hovering around, and my observer said, there he is. We got one on his knees in a bomb crater. I called the guns and told them, follow my landing light, give me full coverage all around. We got to Tim, his name was Tim Connery. We got to Tim, picked him up. I told the guns, we got him, we're going out the same way. And as we were flying out, my observer looked back and said, "He's falling out. He's sliding out." So I landed it somewhere in the jungle. We landed. Observer got out. I said, "Hook him up, find out if he can make it to an American hospital, or we have to go to Vietnamese." He said he can make it to American, which was about 20 minutes away. At the same time I took off, my 20-minute warning light came on. So I got 20 minutes of fuel. I don't know, you never really relied on a 20-minute warning light because you never know if it's accurate or not. So we got up, I got up there, we got him back, we got up to altitude, and I didn't hear anything on the radios. Somehow, all my radios got turned off. And so I turned them on, and I told the guns, "Hey, we're at 1,500 feet. We're going into Pleiku to the aid station." So we flew to the aid station, dropped him off, and I went in to see how he was doing so I could tell his unit. And he said he's been dead for hours. Well, it was hard to believe. So, the strange part of the story
Take your time.
Tim was the front seater of the ship 4 days ago that led me into the fire base. And his aircraft commander, Bill, he wasn't on the ground. I thought they'd picked him up. He and Aide, escape and evasion, tried to get away for 3 days, and they never told us he was still down there. And he finally got captured, and he wrote a book. It's a great book. And I didn't know this until at a reunion. When I found him, we started talking. So I went up to his reunion they had, and I owed one of the pilots $50 from a poker game the night before I got shot. So I said, "I owe somebody $50 named McIntosh. You got anybody here now?" "No, he's not here." I said, "Well, I owe him." Then I met Bill. We started talking about those missions, and I never knew he was on the ground. And it was really shocking to me they didn't say that the other pilot hadn't been picked up. So I think that's about it.
Let's thank all of these veterans and members here. Now, I'd like to see if folks have questions, and we'll bring a mic out. Questions from the audience? Bill.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your stories. You know, there's a professional app that's called LinkedIn that is like connecting people all across the world about their professions and interests and whatnot. And I follow, there's a post that is somewhere in Virginia. And what I noticed was there's, you know, a lot of young veterans that are coming up that are sort of revitalizing many of these posts. And I've noticed that they've gotten very, very political to try and support, you know, veterans in different ways. And I'm wondering if you're finding that also as an avenue to help others and to heal. Are you becoming more political as a group to help make sure that your interests are met?
Well, when you say political, that always kind of triggers me a little bit because of the environment we're in the United States right now. And that's scary to me. I know that in my meetings, politics is not allowed to be on the floor. Now, we may, because we all have different opinions and we all feel strongly about those. However, when it comes to veterans, we're all on the same side of the tracks with that. And I do really treasure the Afghan vets and the Iraqi vets and all those guys because, I'm 74 years old and I'm one of the young ones, as far as Vietnam goes. And Vietnam vets especially, not American Legion or VFW, but Vietnam vets, we're a last man standing organization. And that makes it a little bit difficult to understand what the future of my side of the war has been. But I really look at the younger vets, and Sean certainly knows about this, how important it is for those guys to get involved. Pardon me. And, and Sean will be able to, I don't know the stats on this, but there's probably less than 1% thank you, of the American youth that actually even considers serving in the military. Whereas when I was 17 years old, it was part of the deal, mainly because most of our parents were in World War II. It was a successful effort. Everybody was gung-ho, et cetera, et cetera. We're in a totally different environment as far as the attitudes towards the military or even toward any kind of service at all. So I just think it's very important that younger people have an interest and are educated and want to get involved.
So I think I actually said it's about 2% of the country today serves in the military. And I think it's like 0.5% of that 2% actually goes out into combat. And it takes about 200 people doing their job, support job, so that one veteran, one service member, can go outside the wire at night, do his mission, and come back either on his own two legs or in a black bag. And I was fortunate enough to take part in some of those missions, and grateful enough to come back on my own two legs. And the military isn't just about guns. A lot of people forget that. You learn how to do logistics. You learn how to do rebuild radios, and the military is probably one of the best hands-on technical schools there are for somebody who's looking for something a little different than just going to a school to learn through books. The military has a job for everything, and I think today's people are forgetting that the military is a great institution. It's done a great job. It hasn't really changed the training too much since I think the Civil War. They still do bayonet training. I'll tell you right now, if you have to affix bayonet, you better be able to run, because that's it. That's over. Does that answer that?
Sean, we attended something a few years ago that you were the speaker at, and you described what happened when you came home and you did have PTSD and you thought you were at that moment still in the service and still fighting the fight, and you backed up in a corner and your wife said something. Would you share that? Because that emotional piece which we experienced with Jim and Ernie,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. My wife today, she and I went to junior high and high school together, and the very first night, I'm back from Afghanistan, done with the military. I'm on terminal leave, which means it's kind of like burning out your vacation time. The very first night after she picked me up from the airport, we're all getting ready for bed. She has 2 kids, and we go to bed. And I guess about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, she wakes up to be walking down the hallway yelling, "One up, hallway's clear." And then I was going on to the next room. And she came out there, she grabbed me, and she brought me back to the bedroom, gently woke me up, and got me back into bed. And the next morning, she goes, "So what was that all about?" "What?" I didn't really have a recollection of it. And she goes, "Well, I caught you in the hallway, walking down the hallway, yelling 'one up,' like you were you were part of a team or whatever." And then, "Oh wow." She goes, "Yeah, that's not going to work here. We're going to have to get you some help. I can't have this with my 2 young children in this household, with you going room to room, clearing them." I said, "Well, we have the safest place in Marin right now." But yeah, it was tough. It was really tough, and I was just so grateful that she was willing to take the time to see me through it. And we're still working on it. Trust me, we're still working on it.
You also talked about you're backing up into the corner and you're ready to get your gun, as if you were still in the field. That's what I remember.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't.
That's all right. Maybe good to forget.
Yeah, right. I'll remember tonight when I go to bed. No, just kidding. Yeah, and let's be honest. A lot of the veterans that came home from Vietnam were males. And coming home and I've heard some of the stories about some of the Vietnam veterans who came home to alcoholism, drug addiction, committing crime, and and there's no place for them to go. No place to go. The VA wasn't set up for them. The Vietnam veterans actually set up their own type of care, and that was through what's called the Vet Center today, which is run by the VA. And they really knew how to. The Vietnam veterans ended up turning it over to the VA and saying, "Listen, you got to follow these guidelines if you're going to take this from us." And they do today, still do. And it's for things like I went through, but even the drug addiction, the alcoholism, and the relentless just fight in their head that I think a lot of us go through. And it's so blessed.
Sean, if I could put one thing out, the Marin County Vietnam Vets of America chapter 547, which I've been involved with, wasn't even created, wasn't even formed till 1989. And I got involved in 92, and I've been involved ever since. But there really was nothing here for us. We were afraid to go to the American Legion. We were afraid to go to VFW. A lot of people did. When I went to that night, when I was told to get the hell out of here and don't ever come back, I probably just ran into the wrong guy at the wrong time. But that was my experience. And I never went back for 20 years. So it was a very difficult time for us. Well, for those, I was able to separate myself out. But the fact is, for a lot of veterans, it was a very difficult time to find out, what did I just do in the last 4 years or whatever? How do I put this all together? How do I understand what I've done? It was very tough.
Touch about the one thing we talked about. Real quick, Ernie was talking about that we weren't ready for it, and I was telling you that we just weren't ready for the Vietnam veterans. I don't know if you guys know this. In 1974, the affirmative action laws that the federal government had set up were changed to add disabled veteran and veteran. And that was to get employers to hire Vietnam veterans, giving them adding them as their own basic population. And today we still have those laws, but they're not really followed too often. You know, you think affirmative action, you usually think race or gender, things like that. But, and I'll be honest with you, Marin County has accidentally, I'd like to think accidentally, fired a couple of veterans that were considered disabled veterans incorrectly, and they have paid the price for it. And one gentleman that came to my office to tell me about it, and we fought that fight. He donated all the money that he got from his case to the USO that he got from Marin County for improperly firing him, and I fight that fight right now. But there's a lot of changes. We just weren't ready for Vietnam veterans to come home, and that's proof right there. I just want to say, Vietnam veterans, a lot of the benefits that I take advantage of today through the VA, which I use the VA for my health care, is the best health care I've ever experienced. The people, the students, it's a teaching hospital, and the students, a lot of them are doing their residency, and they haven't served, but they'll tell you, gosh, thank you so much for your service. My grandfather served, or something like that. They'll tell you that, and they'll just look you right in the face and tell you thank you. And sometimes I get so emotional about it at a dental appointment. It's just crazy, It's just it's overwhelming.
How a lot of people get emotional about that.
Well, it's before it even starts. Then
One thing, I'm mentioning that this affirmative action happened in 1974. I got my undergraduate degree in 1974, and I was told to make sure the military service was not on my resume. They said, do not put military service on your resume. And I was all looking for a career job.
One of the things I found with my own involvement with this brigade and the platoons that I adopted, in addition to supporting the brigade, I also always had at least one platoon that I adopted because I wanted to stay connected to those people actually in combat. And I've adopted over 20 platoons in the last 20 years. But what I saw was the importance when they came out of combat of their own peer support. The 2 infantry battalions of this brigade formed their own private Facebook pages because their soldiers were struggling so much. And they swarmed. Whenever somebody surfaced on Facebook evidencing some problems, they all swarmed. And every morning when I get up, I go to those pages and I just see if there's anybody who's heading for trouble. And I've been on the phone late at night with many soldiers, talking to them, trying to help them through. That peer support is so critical. I don't think there's anything stronger that exists in terms of the importance, because veterans understand each other in a way that so many of us on the civilian side don't.
I have 4 hands up.
Okay.
All right.
Jim, listening to your story, reminded me, you're the second person I personally know whose last flight in Vietnam was when they were shot down, medevaced, and both of you obviously are alive. Another friend I went through infantry school with, shot down, killed in Vietnam. Tell me, the casualty rate on the helicopter pilots and crew in Vietnam, wasn't that extremely high?
I have been told it was. I don't have any facts or figures on it. Tony does. He knows everything. Want to say something?
Most of the time, I'm just happy to remember my name. But I'm Tony Lazzarini. Like Jim, I was in aviation helicopters. I was one of the guys that were known as the GIBs, the guys in the back. I was a machine gunner. Like Jim, I did a couple hundred missions. I got shot down 7 times. And I always tell people it was twice by the VC and 5 times by the nurses. But anyway, to answer your question, if you were in Army aviation, if you were in a helicopter crew in Vietnam, your chances of dying were 3 times greater than the guys on the ground. When I was going to door gunner school in Hawaii, prior to being sent over, they said the average lifespan of a door gunner in a combat situation was 20 seconds.
That's why you're
Well, you never saw Vietnam then. But the interesting thing is we lost over 5,000 helicopters during the war. We lost more guys in helicopters than they lost in the entire war in Iraq. That's how tough that job was. And we were always, like Jim, I did the same thing. I flew medevacs, emergency resupply missions. We used to have these things called FOB missions, which was fly over the border. And one time the captain said, "Tony, I got a great mission for us." I don't mind telling the stories, do you? Okay, he said, we're going to go here. We're going to be different. No dog tags, no Geneva Convention cards, no markings on your uniform. And we flew off. We picked up a black unmarked helicopter, and off we'd go somewhere. But the important thing that Jim had pointed out too was there's 4 guys in that helicopter, and at any time, we could all die together. And it formed an extremely strong bond. And it's something that you usually can only talk to other veterans about, and they won't understand. Every year, I own a little company, and March 29th is National Vietnam Veterans Day. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but I always throw a party at my club, and it's free. Any Vietnam veterans are available, can come in. Sometimes you might hear about combat vets or Vietnam era vets. To me, it doesn't make any difference. You serve your country, you never know what the hell you're gonna go. Once you sign up, but you signed up, and whether you're a cook or a gunner or a pilot, it really doesn't make a difference. You served your country, and when I speak to different groups, I try to make that the most important thing. It's not what you do or who you are. You served your country. That's the most important thing. But I hope that answers your question about what it's all about. Thank you. Excuse me.
The few people, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I also have a question.
Certainly.
I've been waiting. First of all, I want to thank Ernie, who started the Marin chapter for the Vietnam veterans here. And I was kind of, along with Gene and I and several other members of Vietnam veterans here in this room that have been part of the Marin County Vietnam Veterans of Marin. Also, I'd like to thank Sean Stevens, which has changed my whole life around, because I was pretty messed up when I came to see Sean. And he guided me in a direction that actually I would have to say saved my life. And I was with, first of all, my name is Nick Guzman, and I was with I was in Vietnam, 69-70, with the 101st Airborne Division. I was with the 2nd 11th Artillery up around the High Corps area, which is up by the DMZ. I was on Fire Base Bastogne with the 155 howitzers. I was boots on the ground. I was, I flew in a Loach from fire base to fire base. I want to touch a little bit on what Sean said, about this gentleman who in prison. Okay. From what I understand is that he's on death row. He got out of Vietnam, he left Vietnam, and then he committed this, whatever the crime may be. But my point is, there was no transition between being in the trenches, being out in the field, in the jungles, and in the deltas, wherever you may have been. There was no transition point to get to be, readjusted back into society again. It's like one day you're in battle and having a firefight, the next thing you're out in public, trying to readjust back into society again. And for someone who has been in a combat situation one day, and then, there's no adjustment there. And from what Sean said about this gentleman, that in his situation, I don't know what his situation was or whatever it may be, but I feel that if there was something there for this person, maybe he may not be there now, because of the trauma that we've gone through to go from one situation to back into society again. It's really hard to make that adjustment, So I basically wanted to touch a little bit on that, but for all of us Vietnam veterans and those who supported the Vietnam veterans, I have to say, the ladies in this room, thank you for being here, because you're all supporting all of us, I mean, it's giving the love to everybody, to each other, and it means a lot, so, but thank you.
Okay. I think you have a question, right? Okay, and then Bill, and if we have time, I would love to have DA Fuguri talk about the veteran court, just from the conversation here.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Darren Pomponio. I'm an Air Force veteran. My family goes back to the American Revolutionary War with military, and I'm very proud to be here. So thank you all, and very proud of your son for going to West Point. A couple things I just want to say is, you mentioned at the very beginning about the recruiting process for the younger folks coming up and getting them into the military. Unfortunately, I have two daughters that have no desire to go into the military, which is unfortunate. But so I want to do everything I possibly can to help that process, whether it's in just Novato, Marin County. Sean, we've met a few years ago. I came in and we spoke, and just so there's a lot of things that I would like to get involved in, or there's things going on here in Novato. Air Force Rotary, is that still going on here? Or is that's gone, huh?
Novato High School after COVID. I'm sorry. Novato High School after COVID released that program due to funding issues.
So unfortunate.
Yeah.
So, again, I guess I just want to make a statement again to say thanks, and I would love to get involved any way I possibly can. I do want to also add, I'm involved in an organization. I'm in the mortgage business, and a few years ago, our organization actually made it mandatory that anytime we take an application for a borrower, that we have to ask them if they are a veteran, because there are benefits in our industry for veterans, and it was never asked before. I got out of the military. I'm 55 years old. I wish I could go back in. I wish I was in right now. I would go in a minute.
Yep.
But when I got out of the military and I bought my first home, I didn't use my VA loan because I didn't know anything about it. And so it's a great benefit. So I just want to say there's a lot of things out there. And Sean, I'm sure you know all the stuff, the ins and outs in this. But that's all. I just want to say thank you, and anything I could do, be involved. I'd like to stay in touch with you, Sean, or any of you up there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren.
I want to add something real quick. I think people forget that we have some amazing academies. We have Annapolis, we have West Point, and we have the Air Force. And I would
Wait a minute, don't forget the Coast Guard.
Okay, Coast Guard. But those are the three. So there are opportunities for high school students, and I think clearly Marin Catholic has done a good job. I don't know about the rest of the high schools in the county, but it's an amazing path. And if you know young men and women, and if you take a look at West Point now, I think it's about 20% of their student body is female, and some of the teeny tiniest women you'd ever see in your life. They do extraordinary things. So I just hope that people realize it's a great path, it's an extraordinary education, and they come out leaders, and they come out officers. So don't forget that. I mean, this path is an exceptional path. Had my son not pursued it, I would know nothing. But having been through it, having attended every event that they had during the 4 years, we just did whatever we could to attend every event. Just the most extraordinary young men and women you would ever meet. They worked very hard to get there. They worked very hard to graduate, and most of them, I think, stay in the service. Some do their 5 years and move on, but it's an option for kids. And I hope kids in this county see that, and it's an honor. It's a complete honor to be accepted to these academies. So just wanted to do that plug. And I do also want to make a quick plug for Blue Star Moms. They'll be very angry at me if I don't. On that table back there are some materials for Blue Star Moms. We do support those men and women in the service currently. They pack their boodle boxes. They do these care packages. We call them boodle boxes regularly, and you can all participate. And it's a wonderful way to support your the young men and women in the military today. So just wanted to make that plug. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your segue, mentioning there are many ways to help, and I would just like to call the attention of the group of a unique organization that is dedicated to helping veterans, and this is formed of mostly men, but there are some women involved there, and we're all fly fishermen, and the organization is called Healing Waters. And what they do is they actively recruit veterans who need help, and they take them fishing. And the impact of that is immeasurable. But it's just that there are so many organizations that are dedicated to helping our veterans, and I just wanted to mention this one, which is a little bit unique. Yeah, and we never keep the fish. We always take it back.
So I think I'll go to her. Okay, and Matt.
I'm just going to really quickly. I'm Lori Fergoli. I'm your district attorney here. I live in Novato, and I remember that moment when that lady stood up and talked about her cousin who was in Vietnam and how she never really appreciated what he went through. But for this conversation, so Sylvia, thank you for carrying this on. And so Sean Stevens has been spearheading for years, and we finally got it going. We just had our 1-year anniversary, a veterans court, so any veteran that comes through the jail and law enforcement is being trained to ask on the street if they find themselves in trouble. Sean and his team, we have a whole team of wraparound services for veterans and get them the services that they can. If we can take care of them in the courtroom, we do. A lot of their cases get dismissed. And there's also, it's a wraparound service thing, and Sean has been carrying that from day one. And so we're honored to serve our veterans in that way. And we have a judge who's been at the start volunteered to help run it. So we're really proud to do that for our service people. So.
I just thought that's really important to mention if you have a veteran friends who need a service.
Thank you. Thanks, Sean, Ernie, Jim. For those of you that are not associated with any military organization, or I represent the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and if you want to get together with other veterans, it's a wonderful organization to be part of. So if anybody would be interested in that, please let me know. I'll be happy to help you.
Yes, we have VFW. We have VFW here at Novato, / VFW in the county. And we have 3 American Legions throughout the county as well. And I'll tell you this, there's a lot of lying going on when they sit down and chit chat. But that's okay, because it's men, some women sitting around telling stories, not getting deep into the mud with tragedy or anything like that, but just hey, this is what's going on, and excuse me, God, this is the worst. Perfect timing. they sit around and they support each other, whether it's about lying about a war story or telling the truth about what's going on at home for them, maybe with their spouse or their adult children or whatever. It's just another way to support each other. And one thing I'll tell you, in the military, there is no better relationship than with your battle buddies. Your battle buddies will know you better than your spouse. Because keep in mind, when you're going out on a mission, you want everybody to be aware of what's going on. Everybody to be paying attention. Everybody have their shit together. And sometimes somebody will get, especially today, now it's easy as heck to make phone calls home to find out the bad news. But sometimes you'll get somebody who just got some bad news and they're not really excited to tell anybody. It's about their wife leaving them or something like that. And so they go start getting ready for the mission that night. And one of their buddies will come in and go, "Hey, what's going on, man? You look different. What's going on?" "Oh, nothing. I'm fine. No. Something's off. Like the spidey sense, something's off. You know what? Why don't you sit this one out tonight? You sit this one out. We're gonna be fine. And then let's chit chat when I get back and find out what's going on, and then we'll fix it together." And that's the kind of stuff that happens in the military. When you go out the gate and you're no longer in the military, you lose those battle buddies. You don't lose them as badly as you did when you guys served because you didn't have Facebook or anything like that. But that relationship is forged in blood and tears and sweat, and you'll never have it again. And you know that when you're walking out the gate, and you know how important that relationship was to you, and that you'll never have it again. You might try to have it with your new team, which is your wife and children to be, but it's never quite as strong. And that's one of the things that, like the VFW and the American Legion, they try to bring that back a little bit. Yes, sir.
There was a couple things I wanted to add to this. First of all, I have to say the VA has bent over backwards to help me, thanks to Sean and people that have helped me. And another thing that I'd like to say to all the Vietnam veterans here, which we did not get, is welcome home, which means a lot to a vet. When somebody says welcome home, it really means a lot to a Vietnam vet. So, welcome home.
I just wanted to say one thing. I just got back from something called Honor Flight, and I really can't say too much about it other than, especially if you're a Vietnam vet, you should go look up Honor Flight Bay Area and sign up, because I was on with, there were 29 of us who were Vietnam, or Vietnam era, as we say, and one Korean vet. And it was such a wonderful healing experience that I just say, please don't think it's something hokey or whatever. It's completely free for the veteran, and it is so worth it. It's worth waiting for if it takes a while for them to call you, but please sign up because you will not regret it.
Jackie, why don't you talk about what you guys did?
It's an honor flight. They take you to Washington, D.C., and they put you up for 2 nights, and they show you a bunch of the memorials that are erected for your time in service, and you get to see a lot. But it's Honor Flight Bay Area, so just Google that, and you can apply.
Jackie, free round-trip airfare, free round-trip airfare, free hotel, free meals for 2 days, and a personal tour of Washington, D.C., right?
Hi, I am Carol. I am a sister of 2 Vietnam War veterans. Were born in New York, raised 15 years in Dayton, Ohio, lived in a similar, like Novato. My first brother was 1967. He defied my Mandarin-speaking father, and he was a staff sergeant. And what is it? The horse. I guess they told me it's the 101st Cavalry. And he stood 5'10", 140 pounds, tan. And he told me one experience. A Vietnam came and looked him up and down, and his sandals. He, left his sandals. Also, can you think of what it was being a minority in the Vietnam and his men? Okay, my second brother is 1969. He got drafted out of Northwestern Medical School, but he had an easier job because he was he's a captain, and he was, he was a captain, engineering unit. And he had a more pleasant time because in the afternoon what he would do is go out and bring advice and medical supplies to the Vietnamese in the villages.
So, just want to mention she's a Sunrise Rotarian. Okay. And her brother is very involved Rotarian, in what, Ohio somewhere?
So we put everybody through boot camp to get them trained, right? And then we send them out, give them more training and whatnot. But when they get out, wouldn't it be nice if they had at least like a month of civilian training or decompression and let them know what resources are out there? I think it would be a huge return on our investment if we were to do that.
I think what you're referring to would be a sense of failure. The training about failure. In the military, failure is catastrophic. It's if you get back in off a mission, your weapon is filled with dirt and crap, and you're tired, you're dirty, you're tired, you want to just eat and lay in your bunk. I'll clean my weapon tomorrow. I'll clean it tomorrow. There's no such thing as tomorrow, first of all. Second of all, who knows what's going to happen in those few hours that you get to sleep. And if you don't clean your weapon, and you're that guy at the wall next to two other people, and you have to take a knee because you didn't clean your weapon, you got to jam, and one of those two people next to you get killed, it's your fault. That's failure. That's catastrophic failure, which is your fault. And I think that has something to do with the training that we don't get coming out of the military, because failure in civilian life, if you're not trying hard enough, you're not failing in civilian life. If you're not failing, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. You're not pushing yourself enough. And that's how we, in civilian life, that's how we're taught. Try. And you're going to fall a couple times, but you'll be all right. Just stand up, dust yourself off. In the military, a 17-year-old kid going into the military, he learns that failure is catastrophic. He doesn't learn that failure is okay. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges we face is with veteran suicide, is that you, and I can tell you that I myself, you get in your head that you're failing at home, you're failing at work. You may not be really failing in these areas, but you tell yourself you are because you're not doing it good to what you want it to be, the standard. And you know what? I need to take myself out. I'm going to create catastrophic failure, but I'm not. But I tell myself I'm going to. And keep in mind, I went in at 38 years old. The brainwashing was I'd already been there, done that. The brainwashing wasn't as effective on me because I had too much other stuff up there. But for a 17-year-old kid, just learning what failure means, and then we don't retrain him when he's coming out, I think it's harmful. I think it's one of the things that we haven't figured out how to retrain or whatever. I don't know, but I can tell you firsthand, it's played with that word. It sucks. It sucks big time.
Well, part of whole thing is kind of the the whole concept of boot camp. What is boot camp? You know, and if you're a civilian, never experienced boot camp, you just can't even imagine what you go through. Boot camp is primarily, well, it's almost totally just to make sure that no matter where the military sends you, you can acclimate and you can function day one. As soon as you sign up and approach the gate, that you're able to function as a military person. Now, if you're going to do special training, that's usually after boot camp. But in boot camp, what they're trying to do is get rid of all your civilian habits, all your civilian reactions, and make you a military guy so you fit within a group. And once you've spent your 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, and they're basically done with you, they don't worry about it anymore. You know, it's a whole nother process of get rid of all your military things. And so it's a difficult situation to be in. But when you're done with boot camp, again, you're expected to function totally 100% in a military fashion whenever you go to your next duty station.
I kind of want to mention what Mayor Lucam talked about the Homeward Bound Veterans Housing, the 24 housing the city of Novato and county building. And Homeward Bound provides wraparound services, including mental health, bringing back people and providing with homeless veterans with, hopefully in 2024, that will house all the homeless veterans in Marin County and will provide them with the service, mental health, and everything else, and also training in order for them to be going back to the permanent housing. So I'm hoping everybody will support that effort. And I personally feel like we have made a lot of progress from what I'm watching and seeing around the county, and you know, the effort into you know, helping people back to their home. So,
okay, let's.
I just want to thank Sylvia Berry for organizing this. This is my first time here, and it's really wonderful. I loved your bio. I would love a copy of that. Well, just the fact that you came over here and your dedication to acknowledging our veterans, I think is really wonderful. Sylvia, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. There is going to be honoring the veterans this day for Veterans Day. And Ernie, could you just tell the folks what the plans are?
Well, you know, November 11th every single year is Veterans Day. Used to be Armistice Day, now it's Veterans Day. There will be, as usual, ceremonies at the Marin County Civic Center. They start about 9 o'clock in the morning. It'll be all outside. We used to do it inside before the pandemic, and we're still, hopefully next year we'll be able to go back to the old ways, but it'll be starting at 9 o'clock, last right until just after 11 o'clock outside. This year it's going to be something special. At 4, and actually Sean knows more details about this than I do, but at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, inside, because we're not sure about the weather, there will be a free lunch for veterans and their families. It's going to be kind of a barbecue. It'll be at 4 p.m. Inside at the exhibit hall, and that's free. Now, civilians who are non-military are also invited. There'll be a $12 fee. It's best if you make reservations early, and there's a website you can make reservations for. But that afternoon at 4 o'clock, there'll be a free lunch, kind of a late lunch, early dinner. Sean, any other details we need to know?
So it's Lombardi's who's doing the barbecue, and then Petty Theft will be playing 2 sets. And it's going to be great. It's going to be huge. It's the same. If any of you went to the dinner we had for the 100th anniversary of the July you put on, it's the same money behind this one. So it's all going to be top notch.
Yeah, it was going to be on the island because of the weather inconsistency. We decided to do it inside while they think it's smart. Now also, that's at 4 o'clock. At 7 p.m. that evening, there's going to be kind of a semi-veteran film festival at the Rafael Theater in San Rafael. They'll be showing and I'm not sure what the movie is, but there's a movie that was created for veterans, about veterans, and they're going to have the director there and some of the actors, and they'll be kind of a little forum of veterans, answering questions and all that for the audience. So in the morning, 9 o'clock for Veterans Day ceremonies, 4 o'clock dinner, lunch, whatever. And then that night, 7 o'clock at the Rafael Theater that night.
Very good. Thanks for coming, folks.